Today I will be discussing the case of Garis and Neville Jeffress Pidler, which considers the fair dealing provisions under the Copyright Act for copyright infringement. Fair dealing marks out areas where copyright material can be used without permission from the owner for certain purposes including research or study, criticism or review, reporting the news, parody or satire, and the giving of professional legal advice. The applicants Brian de Garis and Matthew Moore were authors of articles published in the West Australian and the Sydney Morning Herald newspapers. The respondent, Jeffress, was a press clipping business that monitored newspapers and media outlets to provide their customers with photocopies of requested material, such as topics of interest that the customers had identified. De Garis claimed that Jeffress had infringed the copyright in their respective works in the course of carrying on its business by reproducing the work. Jeffress's defense was that it fell under the fair dealing provisions of research or study, criticism or review, or reporting of the news. The issue for the court was whether the fair dealing provisions could apply here. This means that the dealing must be 1. For the relevant purpose, and 2. Fair. The relevant purpose is that of the person making the dealing, not the purpose for which the reproduction will ultimately be used. So firstly, was the reproduction for the purpose of research or study? Research was defined under the Macquarie Dictionary as diligent and systematic inquiry or investigation into a subject in order to discover facts or principles. However, it was held that the dealing was for a commercial purpose in supplying material in return for a fee. Since Jeffress's purpose was not for research or study, it was irrelevant that customers may have later used the press clippings for research or study. As such, the relevant purpose was that of the person making the dealing, not the purpose for which the reproduction will ultimately be used. Secondly, was it dealing for the purpose of criticism or review? Criticism is the act or art of analysing and judging the quality of a literary or artistic work, passing judgment on the merits of something, or a critical comment, article or essay, whilst review refers to the critical article or report as the end product. The court held that there was no criticism or review. Jeffress simply found and reproduced the documents in their original form without additional commentary, analysis or judgment on the merit of the articles. Justice Beaumont pointed out the task undertaken is one of location rather than evaluation. Finally, could the dealing have been for the purpose of reporting the news? The news was defined as including report of any recent events and events published in a newspaper, journal, radio or television. Since the purpose of Jeffress's production was of a purely commercial nature, it was not engaged or associated with reporting the news. Furthermore, the press clippings were also not republished in a magazine, newspaper or similar periodical, but given for the customer's private use. On the element of fairness, Justice Beaumont emphasised that it was a question of degree considered in light of the circumstances of the case. He cited relevant factors including the number and extent of extracts, the use and proportions used, as well as the general impression given. Justice Beaumont held that the dealing was not fair. Jeffress took the whole of de Garis's work, he used it for a solely commercial purpose to gain reward in a trading activity and not for any of the purposes argued under the fair dealing provisions. Therefore, Jeffress could not rely on the fair dealing provisions as defences and had infringed the copyright in de Garis's work. This stands as an important case in copyright law as it outlines the limits of the fair dealing provisions as defences against copyright infringement. The case's narrow interpretation means that third parties cannot easily rely on the fair dealing provisions, especially intermediaries who are acting on behalf of an individual, as fair dealing only applies to the person doing the act.